Dean Gallagher to a couple more, I think. Using the same climate data and science as the climate change community and accepting the premise that humans are producing CO2 and that this contributes to greenhouse warming of the planet, can you make the case that many of the extreme actions and policies pursued by alarmists are not necessary or helpful? This is a superb question because my complaint is this. My complaint is not that people are saying the climate is getting warmer. Whether it is or not, I don't know. It's certainly, without question, getting warmer in Southern California, and in a very short period of time. When I came here in 1988, starting in November, there would be snow on the Big Bear and the mountains up there, Mount Baldy and so on, and that would stay through February, and we would start skiing in November. And last year there was a day's worth of snow on the mountain, period, for one day during the entire winter. I remember when I got here in 1988, even a short time ago, I would come out to my car after a limousine driving shift at 1 or 2 in the morning in Pasadena, and there would be frost on my car every single evening. And I've not seen frost on my car in 15 or 20 years. Now, I'm not saying that that's caused by that, but I am saying that is definitely happening. There's no questioning about it. It seems that the winters in Russia are not as severe as they used to be, and so on. So far, so good. Where I get off the boat with you, and if I'm speaking to a climate scientist, I would say the part where you need to be ashamed of yourself is the part where you take what is something that might be of genuine concern, and because you have such low opinion of your fellow citizens and such contempt for people who simply would like to be proven something before they give up everything they have and turn all their money and freedom over to you. The thing you should be ashamed of is when you start saying things like, we have to save the planet. That's what you should be ashamed of. There are a generation now, an entire generation, hundreds of millions, probably billions, of younger people today who are convinced that if they do not throw their aluminum can in the recycle bin, that the earth will be destroyed, that everything on it will burn, and that if we don't give up our addiction to oil, it's only a matter of a few years before the planet burns to a cinder and then floods and there is nothing left and the planet is dead and destroyed. There is nothing that can destroy this planet. And when I say destroy it, I mean destroy all life on this planet. Anything big enough to cause an extinction level event is now big enough to have been seen. There are still, the bad news is there's still hundreds and thousands, probably hundreds of millions of Earth-crossing asteroids out there that we haven't seen yet. But the good news is that the more we look, we realize the ones that are getting by are smaller and smaller and smaller. It could be a bad day if it lands on your city, but it's not going to affect the planet. And that's the only real threat there is right now. I suppose a supernova eruption within a certain sphere could also be very bad. But that's not, somebody put gamma ray burst just as I said that. That could also be something catastrophic, but that's not something that we're talking about. It's not within our control under any circumstances. So when you start saying things to young people like saying we have to save the planet, you're lying. And even if you were to saying we have to save the life on this planet, you're lying. If you're trying to say that we have to save human life on this planet, you're lying. You're lying because if it is in fact true that things are getting warmer and you say that people are going to die of heat stroke that didn't die before, that is true. But you're lying because the number of people who will not freeze to death is much greater than the number of people who would die from heat stroke. Much greater. So to say that all of these people are going to die who wouldn't have died otherwise is to lie. You're telling the truth to the degree that people will die in different areas, but more people will be alive as a result of the warming. And the part I'm trying to get at here is simply this. They are saying that if carbon dioxide left, it's been a while since I've done the numbers. Let's say it's 400 or approaching 400, 390 something right now, CO2 parts per million. And they're saying, off the top of my head, they're saying if it gets to 450, that's the end of life as we know it. That's a lie. And every single one of you knows it. Every single one of you knows that it's a lie because there has been millions and millions and millions and millions of years on this planet where the average mean temperature wasn't a centigrade degree higher. It was 20 centigrade degree higher. There's been a time when the CO2 levels on planet Earth were 3,000 parts per million. And you're telling us that the world's going to end if we go from 410 to 420? There have been 3,000 parts per million carbon dioxide levels historically in this planet many times. And those were not caused by humans. Now, this may be caused by humans. I'm willing to listen to the science on that. I'm willing to listen to the argument on that. But to tell me that this is something that we have to burn capitalism to the ground and give up everything that we work so hard for instead of using that technology to make whatever adjustments we need to. If you're telling me we have to give all of this stuff up because at 420 or 450 parts per million, the Earth simply goes extinct, you're lying. And you're lying by a large margin because the planet has on its own had carbon dioxide levels that are 8 or 10 times what you are claiming is the maximum worst case scenario. And if you don't know that's true, you need to go back and take elementary ecology, elementary geological history. Kansas has been under 2 miles of water, and it's also been under 1 mile of ice. And we didn't have anything to do with that. Now, I'm not saying that I want to live under 1 mile of ice. I'm not saying I want to live under 2 miles of water. But what I am saying is there is nothing on the horizon. There's not the most wild, most extreme, most alarmist condition out there is talking about a sea level rise of 1 or 2 feet or a carbon dioxide push to 450, maybe 500 parts per million. There is no one talking about a 2-mile rise in sea level, and there is no one talking about carbon dioxide levels reaching 3,000 parts per million, and yet Earth has been a very comfy place in the middle of America. Instead of having these Kansas wheat fields of just essentially cold, flat ground with some grass growing in it, when those carbon dioxide and temperature levels were there, the entire middle of the United States was covered with an inland ocean, and it was teeming with life. There was life everywhere. There were flowers and plants and ferns, and there were little dinosaurs and big dinosaurs, and there were all kinds of things going on, and bugs flying everywhere. And if you had stood on the shores of Kansas 85 million years ago and then seen Kansas 85,000 years ago, you would have said, what the hell happened to all the living things, and what's this mile of ice doing here? And you'd be quite alarmed about that. And if you had seen Kansas when Kansas was filled with all of that tropical life and then saw Kansas today, you would think that a catastrophe has happened to Kansas. A catastrophe. This place used to be filled with living creatures, enormous thousands, billions of them. They were flying through the air and they're walking on the ground and there's all these ferns and plants, and now it's just this wasteland of grass because carbon dioxide levels have fallen to such perilously low numbers as 150, 200, 300 parts per million. Don't treat us like we're children, okay? If you want to make a case, stop acting like you're the only people that understand this stuff or are capable of understanding it. And because of these lies and because of this rhetoric, I don't trust you. And I don't trust you because every time that we discover there's a revision that is made to take actual temperatures and adjust them to your model. And that's just plain not science, that's cheating. And if it turns out that your data is in fact as alarming and as consistent as you say it is, then why have we caught emails, and not just 1 or 2 emails, then why are there so many emails internally among East Anglia and NASA and all the rest of these data sets? Why are there so many emails saying that we have to tell this lie, like the hockey stick, for example? The hockey stick is a statistical invention. It is taking a graph like this, and cranking it 45 degrees so it's this. If you have the data, you don't have to lie about these things. If you have the data, you don't need to construct a hockey stick statistically. You can show actual temperature rise and have enough to get people's attention. The hubris of it is not, it's not just the hubris, it's when you talk about actual climate scientists, look, I'm not a climate scientist, and I'm not one of these people that's saying there's nothing happening. I just don't know. But here are some things that I do know. These are some things that I do know because these things are just simple facts. When somebody says that 100,000 climate scientists agree on this data, What you're saying is 100,000 climate scientists have created computer models that agree on this data, but the data comes from 2 data sets. It comes from East Anglia and NOAA, maybe a third one. So you can make the argument there's 100,000 scientists who have come to the same conclusions, but there's 100,000 scientists who are basically building their theory on one set of data. And that set of data has constantly been adjusted and tweaked to match the model. They're not tweaking the model to match the data, they're tweaking the data to match the model. So I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. And when you tell me the science is settled, the second you say something like that, I now instantly know that you're not a scientist, that you're a politician, that you're an activist. If you ever have the audacity to say that the science is settled, you should just shut up and trust the authorities, you've simply just announced in the loudest possible terms that you have no idea what science is whatsoever. The science is settled. Really. Well, guess what? It is possible for one person to devise an experiment that proves that everything you believe is wrong. And if that experiment can be reproduced around the planet with the same general numeric output, then that person has proved that the science is not settled. And every single advance that has ever happened in science has been a result of people who have not been willing to settle for the fact that the science was settled, that the science on the steady-state universe was settled until it wasn't. And it was settled on any number of things until it wasn't. It was settled on Newtonian physics until it wasn't. It was settled on all of this stuff until it wasn't. So anybody who says that you should just shut up and listen to us and do what we say because the science is settled is not a scientist. They're an anti-scientist. And if your models are in fact that good, then why are you not able to do predictions? In other words, if you're able to do a 100-year prediction, why can't you do a 10-year prediction? And to the degree that you do 10-year predictions, as you did in 2005, your 10-year predictions were saying things like there will never be snow again by 2015. New York might be underneath a couple of inches of water by 2015. To the degree that you've made predictions based on your model over a time frame that we can live to see, your predictions have been pretty spectacularly wrong. Kind of amazingly spectacularly wrong. And you wonder why we're concerned about this? CP Tomes just put a link in the live feed to Burt Rutan on climate change. Burt Rutan, the fact that he's a personal friend of mine is obviously one of the highlights of my life. But Burt Rutan basically put this way. He said, Burt Rutan, as I've said on the show before, is an aeronautical engineer. Put aside the fact that he's a genius. He's simply just take him as an aeronautical engineer. He's a person who designs airplanes. And since he designs airplanes, what he does is he comes up with a plan. He creates an airfoil, creates a certain amount of surface area on the wing, comes up with a Reynolds number, comes up with the amount of thrust he's going to think he needs to get the weight of this up to a certain speed, and so on. That's what Burt Rutan does. And then when it turns out the airplanes don't do what Burt Rutan expected them to do, not exactly anyway, Burt Rutan does not throw up his hands and say, the science was settled, there's something wrong with the atmosphere, my plane's not flying. He understands that the entire process of this is, I'm going to give it my best shot, I'm going to get data, and the data is going to tell me where I'm wrong. And where I'm wrong, I'm going to make adjustments. Because the data, if the data is recorded accurately, never lies. If the data says one thing and I predict something else, and that data is routinely coming back reliably, then I'm wrong. And the data is not wrong. The data is never wrong if the data is reasonably accurately collected and reproducible across the spectrum of the world. So Burt Rutan has said about this climate change issue, about the death of the Earth issue anyway, Burt has said that there's nothing there. And people have responded to him by saying, well, you're not a climatologist. How do you know? Burt said, you're precisely right. I'm not a climatologist. I'm not creating the data, and I'm not gathering the data. I'm looking at your data, and I'm telling you from your data that what you're saying is just not there. Burt is a real interesting guy. He showed when he was I want to say it was 2015, there was the anniversary of him first bringing the Very Easy. It might have been the 30th or 40th anniversary. I was honored enough and privileged enough to be there with him for that. And he showed some pictures from when that plane first came to Oshkosh, Wisconsin 30, 40 years ago. And Bert was a lot younger, but the mutton chops are still here, and they're looking good. And he's in great shape, and he's as sharp as he ever was. And he showed a couple of pictures of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The air show has been held there pretty much the same time of year, every year for half a century practically. And he shows pictures of them moving this aircraft through the fields at Oshkosh. And the fields at Oshkosh are brown. It's almost like Nevada. And Bert said, "Oh, and by the way, look at how barren Oshkosh was when carbon dioxide levels were at the perilously low level of 150 parts per million, which is what people are trying to get us back to." He said it was a wasteland. Now there's more carbon dioxide. Plants are growing. They need less water when there's more carbon dioxide. Oshkosh is a much nicer place than it used to be. So Bert Rutan's not one of these guys that's got his fingers in his ears and saying, this isn't happening. Bert Rutan's a guy who's saying, what you are claiming is not what's happening. And you're lying. So even if it is warming to the degree that they say it's warming, first of all, how is this a net loss? But much more importantly than that, it doesn't matter if Oshkosh is getting nicer. Forget that for a minute. It doesn't matter that the Earth is greener now than it's ever been. If you look at the Earth from space, it's greener than it's ever been because there's more carbon dioxide and plants need carbon dioxide to grow. There's no question that the carbon dioxide levels are higher and the place seems to be a better place. But that's part of the lie. Now, the thing of it is that it doesn't matter whether Oshkosh, Wisconsin is a nicer place or not a nicer place. What matters is that he knows, Bert knows, and the people that are ringing this bell know that the carbon dioxide levels that have existed on this earth are so far beyond anything that anyone is talking about that the whole argument is a lie. If they want to read, hey, how are you? We're good. Good? We're fine. Thank you. Right. Have a good night. If you want to come and make a case that this warming of the planet is real and will cause consequences, and here are the consequences based on a potential 2-centimeter rise in sea level or a 12-inch rise in sea level, and you want to talk to us about what will happen as a result of this, then I'm all happy to sit down and listen to this conversation. I'm perfectly happy. But if your model says that this is going to happen, this much is going to happen in 100 years, your model should be able to tell me what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years. In other words, if your model is going to crunch data that's going to get you to 100 years from now, you presumably have to go through the iterations necessary to get to 100 years from now. So what does the data say from your model that's going to happen 20 years from now? That'll give you a more accurate picture. Technically speaking, you should be able to tell you what's going to happen 5 years from now or 10. A shorter snapshot, not as reliable, but nevertheless, we should be able to do that. This isn't happening, and when you and here's when you begin to get a sense of why. They keep discovering things that they hadn't thought about before, and that makes their model better. And I'm all in favor of this. This is like Bert getting flight test data. He thought this was going to happen. Something slightly different happened. I'm going to make adjustments to my design because the atmosphere is always right. And now the plane will fly better. But they make these adjustments, significant adjustments, and they pretend like this, well, now the model's better. Okay. So now the model's better, and the model still was very, very alarming. Yeah, but it's not as alarming, is it? No, it's not as alarming as it was, but it's still very alarming. So you've already admitted that there were elements to this perhaps most complex mathematical problem in the universe. Weather changes are so chaotic and they're subject to so many variables. Just the fact that you can make any kind of model at all is kind of impressive to me. If you can make a model that shows it's cooler at nighttime than it is in daytime, that'll impress me, because it is an incredibly difficult thing to model. If you're telling me that you missed something, and now that you have something, your model has been modified, whether or not it makes the conclusion worse or not so bad is not as relevant as the fact that you have since discovered that there was some major element to this thing that you put together, to your train set, that you not only hadn't taken care of, but that you didn't know existed. So all of that is relevant and bearing. But if you want to get to the motivation, strangely enough, the clearest example of the motivation doesn't come from the scientific community. In fact, it doesn't come from progressives at all. If you want to understand the motivation of the Earth is dying and the so-called money trail, the best place to go is to go not to Berkeley or Antifa or Barack Obama or Al Gore. If you want to see what drives this, the best place to go is to any hotel in America, but let's just take, for the sake of the argument, let's just say a Best Western. If you go to a Best Western, let's go upscale a little bit, Marriott, let's say. You go to a Marriott anywhere in the country now, and you will arrive at the bathroom, and on the counter in the bathroom, you will see a card with some kind of green coloring on it and leaves. And the leaves and the card are sitting there right in front of you, and what the card will say is this: help save the planet. Okay, I live here. I'm in favor of saving the planet. So far, so good. Help save the planet. And then below that, you'll hear washing towels and daily changing sheets uses 4,000 gallons of water per day and dumps this much laundry detergent into the environment every day. So if it turns out that you want to save the planet and you don't want fresh towels every day, simply hang the towels up. If you do want a fresh towel every day, just leave the towel on the floor and we'll get you a new towel. But help save the planet, if you would, please, by doing this. And now you're on to the whole scam. Because whether or not you want a fresh towel is not going to affect the planet at all. What it will affect is it will affect the profitability of the hotel. It is obvious that if people do not have to have all of their towels washed every day, the hotel will save a significant amount of money in terms of the water cost, the electricity cost to wash it, the cost of having it replaced, and so on. If people are ready to have, and I'm perfectly willing to have a towel that, that unless I live in Florida when the towel's wet all the time, but in a general rule, if I use a towel in the morning, come back tomorrow morning, take a shower, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me that I have to have a fresh towel. My point is, if you're willing to do that, you're willing to save the hotel a significant amount of money, and that's in the interest of the hotel. And it's in your interest too. And the hotel doesn't trust you enough to simply tell you the truth. And the truth isn't, if you would like to save the planet, hang your wet towels up and we won't reuse them. That's not the truth. The truth is, if you would like to save money by making our operating costs cheaper, then please hang the towel up and we won't have to wash it again. And this is a perfectly, absolutely legitimate reason to do something that's not a great inconvenience anyway. But now you're down to the motivation, because it sounds more compelling for you to say, hey, if you would like to save the planet, do this, or else your children will die. That's a little more motivational than if you'd like to save $1.50 on your next stay at Marriott Hotel, please hang up the towels that you don't want washed that day. And so it is a clear-cut example of people who are willing to, you can't really accuse them of, well, you can accuse them of lying when you say save the planet. You can't really accuse them of lying when they say it's to the planet's ecological advantage to hang up your towels and not have them washed every day. On some level, on some microscopic level, that's true, but that's not why they're asking you to do it. They're asking you to do it to save them money and effort and time. And we talked about the cost, and there's also the cost of the employees that have to do the washing and so on. So Why not just tell the truth? Listen, it costs a lot of money for us to wash these towels every day, and we can keep our rates lower and provide you with the same quality of service at lower rates if we can save some money. So now you're on to the motivation. As a sales tool, it's not as strong. And when you look at all of these green detergents and green this and green that and green this and green that, you'll see the same thing every time. I'm not saying Windex does this. I'm taking it off the top of my head. Hey, there's Windex. Windex is blue. But if you use green Windex uses 20% fewer planet-killing chemicals. So save the planet and buy green Windex, which is slightly more expensive than other Windex. But we're saving the planet. You're saving the planet. You know, the whole future of humanity is in your hands now in this decision that you make. And there you go. And if you've got a guy who's standing there and he's a climate scientist and he's saying either you listen to me or else during the course of your life there will be a rise in sea level that is this high. So give me all of your money and stop arguing. And if you take that same guy, and let's assume he's telling the truth. Let's say that's exactly what the data says. And if the same guy were to say, having formerly said, if you don't give me all of your money and all of your power and shut up and let me run things, then in 100 years, the ocean will be this much higher. That is not as powerful an incentive as the same guy saying, if you don't give me all of your money and all of your power right now, then the planet is going to die. Life on Earth will be extinct. And you can ask people, young people, if they genuinely believe, do you really think that if we don't start doing things differently, all life on planet will become extinct? And 9 out of 10 of them will tell you yes. Yes. If we don't buy the green Windex and if we don't hang the towels up, the planet will be destroyed. There will be no Earth. There'll be no planet. There'll be no life on Earth. And that is a filthy, manipulative lie. So all I want is, I'm not trying to tell climate scientists what happened. I'm not trying to tell them that I know more about what is happening to data than they are. What I'm telling them is, I have not only a courtesy, but I have a right, and I will insist upon it as a member of the society that is run as a democratically elected republic, and as a citizen of that republic, I demand that you show me the actual data and treat me as if I'm capable of understanding it, because I am. And to the degree that you're not willing to teach me and tell me about things as actually are, and are determined to lie to me about consequences in order for you to get what you want, because you think I'm too stupid to understand it, me and the rest of the country, and therefore you're willing to lie in the interest of the common good, of course, in order to prevent this catastrophe, which isn't quite as severe as you say, but still is going to be pretty bad. So give me all your money and all your power. If you're telling me that I have to listen to you do this, and I have to give up on this, and just do what you say, the fact that I'm saying I'm not going to do that doesn't make me anti-science. It makes me anti-tyranny. It makes me anti-lie. It makes me anti-power grab. It makes me skeptical, which, to close this entire goat rodeo, skepticism is a term that is being applied to people who don't buy this argument hook, line, and sinker. They're called climate skeptics. And once again, when somebody says, "Oh, you obviously don't, you're not scientific, you're skeptical about this," skepticism is the essence of science. Science runs on skepticism. Skepticism is the fuel that powers science. It's always been the fuel that powers science. It always will be the fuel that powers science. And to anybody who says that being a skeptic is something bad is not only not a scientist, they're an anti-scientist. Skepticism is the essence of science. Science runs on skepticism. I am skeptical about the fact that the presumed fact, because Aristotle said it's true, that a heavy ball will hit the ground faster than a lighter ball. If I take a light ball and a heavy ball and drop them at the same time, Aristotle says that the heavy ball will hit the ground first. That obviously makes a lot of sense. Of course it makes sense. Well, I'm skeptical about that. How dare you? I'm skeptical about it. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it might not be true. And because I'm skeptical about this idea that's been passed down for 3,000 years without anybody doing the kind of simple test that Galileo did, because I'm skeptical, I'd like some proof. So, if your theory is correct, Mr. Pseudoscience, go up to the top of yon tower there, take a big ball and a little ball, a heavy ball and a light one, and drop them at the same time, and we will be able to see the heavy ball hit the ground before the lighter ball does. And that's all I want. I want you to show me that what you're telling me is true. Do it. They won't do it. Because when they do it, they find, to your utter amazement, see, this is the thing. This is why this is such a great example. It seems absolutely intuitively true that a heavy object would fall faster than a light one. That is so intuitively correct. The idea that a light ball, and we're putting aside wind resistance, obviously, but wind resistance over a 100-foot drop with spheres this size is not a significant factor. If I take a bowling ball and a golf ball and I drop them from the same time, from the same height, they will hit the ground at the exact same time. And that does not seem to make sense. If I drop a feather and a hammer and I do it on the moon, they'll hit the ground at the same time too, because the feather falls light there. The feather takes longer to get down there, not because it's lighter, it's because it's got more air resistance. Take away the air, the feather and the hammer fall at the same rate. I've seen it done with my own eyes because they did it on the moon. So, I am skeptical. I'm skeptical about everything. If you want me to believe you on something like this, especially something that's counterintuitive as the ball's falling, then show me. And when Galileo makes a statement that seems ridiculous, no, a light object and a heavy object will fall at the same rate. Pfft, come on. Allow me to demonstrate. Up you go. I have conducted that experiment. I've conducted it on camera in Venice Beach 4 or 5 years ago and recorded people's reactions to it. And I have to tell you, when they first dropped the ball, we used a zip line on Venice Beach. And when they first dropped the heavy ball and the light ball and they hit the ground at the same time, I was quite amazed. I knew it was going to happen, but nevertheless, it's so counterintuitive that to see it with your own eyes is really quite a shock. It's quite an interesting experience. So that's pretty simple, really. By the way, for those of you who are still having problems with this heavy ball and light ball, I know that everybody here knows that this is true, and they know it's true now because I tell you it's true. They know it's true because they've seen the experiment conducted. And best of all, if you don't believe it, you can take a heavy object and a light object yourself and go to the top of a tall structure yourself and do the experiment yourself, and you will get the same answer, and then you will be convinced that this is in fact true because it's experimentally repeatable. But I had the hardest time understanding this. I really did. I had the hardest time understanding why this is true. And what I realized was, and this is just for your own edification, what I realized is that when something is falling, it doesn't weigh anything. The reason a heavy ball and a light ball hit the ground at the same time is because the definition of heavy and light is the resistance of an object, the force that the ground creates as this object is accelerated by gravity towards the center of the earth. The weight of something is determined by it pressing down on something else, scale, let's say, a bathroom scale. So a ball that's pressing down on a bathroom scale, the scale is resisting the acceleration of that ball, and the amount of that resistance, the amount of that force is measurable as weight. But if you take the scale away, that object doesn't have any weight, and it won't have any weight until it runs into something. And since the light ball and the heavy ball are both falling weightless, they weigh the same, which is nothing. They have no weight. They have mass, but they don't have weight. So, there you go. It's kind of cool. Once I understood that the reason they fall at the same rate is because while they're falling, a heavy ball and a light ball have the same weight, which is no weight. That really cleared it up for me. Really did. Really made it a lot easier for me. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. They're falling at the same rate because they have the same weight, which is 0. If you decide to measure the impact, you will find that the heavy ball does considerably more damage than the light ball, which is why they shoot cannonballs at people instead of cantaloupes. But weight and mass are different things, and that's what this experiment proves. This experiment is, in fact, a perfect descriptor of what we feel to be true and is not true. Intuitively, we're wrong, And we're also shown by that experiment that there's a difference between weight and mass. And if you're really on the ball, if you'll pardon the expression, you will find that if you were to use an explosive charge to accelerate that ball faster than gravity would, if you had a cannon pointed it straight down and blasted it out of a cannon, you'll find that bowling ball will do more damage than the golf ball. You could have found that out by dropping it. What you'll find is if you accelerate it more than gravity, it will do a lot more damage, and it will do damage in an increasing way, way out of scale to what you would expect to be the case. In other words, the faster you move it, the more damage it's going to do, even though the weight is the same. The mass is the same. Physics is fun, as Lord Bios says. And so here we are in a world where we weigh things. We weigh things because there's a floor to stop our acceleration towards the center of the planet. Michael Moore and Dr. Ruth weigh exactly the same thing if they are falling off of a mountain on the moon. They will hit the ground at the exact same rate. Michael Moore will make a bigger crater. But that's not counterintuitive at all. I think that will do it for this boy who needs to crank out a thumbnail or two and then go home to his lovely wife and get some sleep. Because while Scott has been here, it's been a wonderful time, and he nevertheless gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning Texas time, which is 3 o'clock in the morning here, and I've had to try and match that to some degree. So exciting things going on, and I think that'll do it for this episode. So thank you very much for joining us for episode. Can somebody please tell me what it is? Is it 203? 204? I'm going to wait a few seconds until the answer comes in. It saves me the trouble of having to look it up myself. And I think we missed an episode in there somewhere. What number should I put on this thing? Somebody please. Is it? I can check it on YouTube. It's not a big deal, I guess. We're trying to bring Natasha things. By now the message is getting out there, and slowly people are rushing to their computers, and they're dashing to the YouTube site, which is something I'm too lazy to be doing, obviously. And I'll find out for myself. Damn it. This is episode. We need to timestamp this baby. So let me go to our YouTube. We'll go to Creator Studio. We'll go to Video Manager, and then we will scroll down. Once it comes up, 204 says Lord Bios. Looks like 204. This is the consensus opinion. Let's test it. And as I scroll down through the list of videos, 10 a week, which we put out here at BillWhittle.com with 2 people or 3, and Daily Wire has 75, by the way. I see that the last Stratosphere Lounge shot on January 2nd, 2019 was episode 203. That would make this episode 204. The science is settled on this, I think. Although, even though the science is settled, if you were to count the episodes, you'd find that there were 1 or 2 missing, so it's probably 206 if you were to get down to the actual number, something like that. But nevertheless, it's going down as 204, whether you like it or not. That will do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And for those of you that are members, we're very grateful. For those of you that write me quite often saying that they've had to cancel their membership due to financial hardships, believe me when I say that I am extremely grateful for the support you've given me. And if anybody on this planet understands financial hardship, it's me. So thanks for doing what you do and for how much you do. And as I said at the beginning of the show, when we handed out those donation envelopes, and some woman put in $3. And $3 is by far the most generous donation anyone has ever made to any cause that I'm a part of. I consider that person to be extraordinarily generous. Because if you put $3 in an envelope, that's impressive to me anyway. All right, so that'll do it. Thanks. So we're going to turn off the, here's what's interesting. We're going to turn off what used to be the YouTube channel, but now is the backup channel. So stick around. We're going to turn off the backup. So long, YouTube fans. See ya. Great talking to you. Have a nice time. We'll see you next week. Bye. I never liked them. But I'm still recording here. So now what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go to this, and then I'm going to stop the recording